Hey guys, welcome back. This is episode six of We Are Judging You. Today we're going to talk about Project 2025 and the pending government shutdown. Many of you have heard, I think we've all heard, government has failed to fund its operations, and therefore apparently not all non-essential staff are going to be furloughed. Okay. And I don't really, agency by agency, the plans will differ. Various agencies are going to come up with a plan. Some agencies have not come up with a plan, and who knows what's going to happen.
This is the federal government.
Federal, yeah, federal, because we're perfect in Texas. The state government needs no improvement whatsoever here. But how does that tie in with Project 2025? And what is Project 2025? Well, here today we have my lovely partner again, Murtaza Sudawala, who knows a lot about Project 2025, certainly more than I do. But maybe Murtaza, just give an overview, like kind of what it is, and do you see any of that playing out now?
I mean, so I think depending on what side of the political aisle you are, either you're very concerned with the Project 2025's takeover of government, or you're like, hey, this is the best thing that's ever come since sliced bread, and I think probably most Americans don't even know or don't even care about it. So the history of 2025, basically, maybe 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more, the Heritage Foundation, which is a big think tank out of DC, had some of their, it sort of was the umbrella organization that said, hey, let's put together what the conservatives movement would want to see happen at the federal government level, right? So after the first time when the first Trump administration came through, a lot of those people, revolving door, that's very common in DC, that whoever the political aides and a lot of the conservative appointees were sort of saw themselves unemployed or outside of power while Biden was in, and it happens every administration. There's a revolving door in DC. I worked there for a few years. There are people coming in and out when Democrats are in power. The Republicans are out. They come looking for jobs at lobbying firms and think tanks and law firms and everywhere else, or executive positions. My understanding is in the first, and a lot of the backdrop of this was that there was a blacklist that had been created to sort of not hire Trump appointees. So that's an important point, right? Because that I think gives a lot of background. That they were just basically blacklisted from the typical jobs going into corporate America or high-level board positions right after serving in.
The Democrats blacklisted.
Yeah, that's the understanding that had happened. Right?
Okay.
Don't hire Trump appointees. It's basically like we don't want them to be doing business and stuff like that. How much anecdotally I heard that a lot. A lot of friends who were sort of former Trump appointees this had happened to, or heard their colleagues had happened to. I don't know what the data is and stuff like that. So I think a lot of that is animating a lot of what's going on. You see today, it's sort of like, hey, when you do that in political terms, there's always revenge to be served at some later date. But besides the point, Project 2025 was sort of a group that started from the Heritage Foundation, but there were other groups, not by any means is it a Heritage Foundation sort of project, who came together and said, hey, every single part of government that we saw in the first term, where you had Trump appointees sort of get an inside glimpse of what's going on, they said, how can we improve it, or how can we in the second Trump or second, whoever at that time it wasn't even clear who the president was going to be, how we could do it to reform and remake government in this limited form. Because there was a lot of arguments about, you were there, conservatives are supposed to be about the party of limited government and less outreach in theory. I don't think in practice it ever happens. So then when they were going to come back, the idea was this would be our organized plan on what needed to happen, which agencies were going to be shut down, which agencies were going to have less powers, who were going to rethink their focus. And we're seeing in many ways the appointees who came in, some of them had played part in putting together Project 2025. Some of them have just sort of been implementing that as a thought process, right? So how the pivot and FCC, EPA, all these kind of alphabet soup agencies that exist in DC, that's sort of the thing. I think the conspiracy theory during the election was that Trump was going to use this as his guidebook to really run government. When he was asked, Project 2025, when he was asked by reporters while he was running for re-election, he said, "I don't know what you're talking about. It's not mine. It's independent. It's not affiliated with me." And now yesterday, there was a funny post that the White House has been doing. Their social media has been amazing. Actually, I've been laughing my head off. I don't know necessarily what you'd expect from the President of the United States. But the White House social media has been, pretty funny. So yesterday there was a video mocking the SNL skit from several years ago, maybe it's even 15, 20 years ago, where Will Ferrell is like dressed up, and they're like basically a behind the scenes of this cult song. It's Blue Oyster Cult. It was like a one-hit wonder back in the day. The song is like "Don't Fear the Reaper," right? And it's just a singing. There's a whole thing about Will Ferrell's like hitting a cowbell, right? And he keeps on saying, "More cowbell, please." So yesterday, the video that the social media put out for the White House was the president dressed up playing the cowbell. The song plays on, and then the head of the Office of Management and Budget, who's supposed to be like the paymaster, right, and responsible for budgeting in the executive branch, he comes out as a Grim Reaper, right, and basically saying, "Look, we're gonna shut it down." And I think either in the caption or the message, Donald Trump says, "Hey, this guy was involved with fame from Project 2025 fame." So conspiracy theorists are basically, and the left is coming out and saying, "Look, this is always the plan." He lied on the campaign trail that he wasn't going to use the 2025, but lo and behold, 9 months into the term, this is exactly how government is being operated. And yesterday he noted that the guy who's going to actually do the cuts is Project 2025. So that's sort of the background. But it's a few hundred pages book that was put together. You can Google it. It's not a hidden secret.
How many times have you read it?
I mean, it's a long book. I mean, besides client matters and stuff, if I have the time. But I may read it. No, so.
Do you think that? Well, we'll start with Texas residents, and then we can balloon to United States residents. Does the average Joe have anything to worry about?
I mean, so it comes back to that, right? Like, I mean, my view on government shutdowns, I mean, we're here. I mean, it's not like anarchy. It's not like outside. Like, what's that movie where like the purge, right? Like going on. That's not going on, right? Like
very good movie. Yeah.
The system of government. The amazing thing that the founding fathers did was the federal government was always supposed to be a limited government, right? It was, hey, we need to put this 13 colonies and 13, and I guess at that point 13 states together, and have a limited form of government. But it was really supposed to be the states that operated day to day. You get married, you go to the state. You don't have to go to the federal government to get approval. I mean, everything, right? I mean, everything except for like certain things like the war power, the immigration power, all of that was supposed to be, reserved in the original Constitution, and which is still there, right?
So then you had 13 different opinions.
Right. Yes.
Now, I mean, I think at some point the founding fathers realized there could be many, many more than 13. Now we have 50 different opinions.
Right. Correct.
50 states.
Right. Plus, the federal government doesn't always agree with the 50, so 51 really, right?
So the federal government used to be extremely weak.
It was supposed to be in theory, right?
And then it became, massively stronger to what it is today. But I think there were thoughts when the Constitution was ratified by the colonies. And then I think that by the time you got around to the Supreme Court being really established, they had very limited jurisdiction initially. Now that jurisdiction is vastly expanded, they're the law of the land. It's sort of within the power of the court to say what law is. That's the Marbury versus Madison quote. And John Marshall was the Supreme Court Chief Justice
at that time. The first one, right?
Invalidating laws left and right to assert the power of the court, which is, it's a branch of the federal government. You've got the executive, you've got the legislative, and then you've got the judicial with the Supreme Court announcing the law of the land, okay? And so I think that at some point the initial opinion shifted with the founders that, hey, we actually need a federal government that's pretty strong. That way there can be 13 different opinions about these matters, but about these other major matters, issues of like taxation. Are we going to pay a commission to federal officials? Who gets to decide what the commission is? And once it's decided, does the Treasury Secretary have the duty to then make the disbursement, or can they decide something else? We need somebody who can actually say something, that's the final word, and that's it. And that's the federal government.
But in their sphere of control, right? So it's both things, right? Like I agree with you that hey, on certain things you need to have one voice, and getting 51, you know, and I used to work overseas, people who wanted to invest in America, that was always a question. It's like, how is it done so differently, right? Like, you know, in many countries like Russia, there's one way of doing it. China, there is one way of doing it. Doesn't matter whether you're in Beijing or Shanghai. And I get it, right? It is inefficient to have 51 different ways of doing everything. But I think the point, to me, in a person who wants limited government, do what's essential, do what's agreed in the Constitution as a compact, and then get the hell out of everything else, right? Like I mean, for example, right? Like this whole you mentioned about putting non-essential workers to furlough them or fire them, depending on how the White House plays it out. Why do we have non-essential workers in the government anyway? That's our tax dollars paying for someone for what purpose? Okay, hey, you know, running it like an organization or corporate organization, which needs to have all these administrative people in order to, you know, to run the organization. I get it for a for-profit business where profit is the motive, but for the government, why do we have non-essential workers? Period.
But aren't like janitors non-essential? Aren't folks who perform like ministerial or even non-ministerial tasks? I mean, aren't they non-essential? I mean, what I guess we'd have to sort of parse what's non-essential versus an essential worker, and then you have to subparse how many of each do you actually need to provide the core function of the agency.
Right. But I mean, so many of those workers are internal affairs, and right now the watch term is internal HRs, and like when the HHS had released that they were doing their reorganization, apparently every agency had their own communications department. So within one department, everyone had a separate communications team because everyone couldn't get the act together on how to run and listen to one voice, right? Like, and again, and just, it's not just the salaries of these people that we're burdening. They get federal government employees get the best benefits. Okay, there's probably nowhere you can find where health insurance is at the top level, right? All of the pensions and the 401ks and all of that stuff, that's being paid by government dollars.
It is, yeah.
And they're unionized. You can, once you get beyond the probationary period, watch. I mean, I remember I was an intern at a federal agency. I won't mention which one. My personal colleague, she was a very senior person. She hadn't talked to her boss, she said, in 10 years. 10 years, because she was upset at her. And that was the kind of protection that the federal government allows for these unionized workers, right? And secondly, I think more than Project 2025, the Trump administration has said that the deep state is the problem. And what is the deep state, right? If you talk to somebody, they're like, well, the deep state exists. It's a secret, sort of shadowy government that does whatever they want. But at the end of the day, deep state is bureaucrats who are, in some sense, protected in their jobs. They can say and do whatever the hell they want, not what the elected, administration puts in play. The bureaucrats are people who are basically vested in the system. So I think, going back to that, if what he's trying to do, and he hasn't espoused it, he hasn't said it yet, at least in a tweet, but if that's what President Trump is trying to do, is get rid of these lifers who don't care. It can be Biden, Trump, maybe in 2028 is DeSantis, Newsom, wherever the case is. They're just answerable to themselves. And I see, and I know very well how they do it, right? You either delay if you have a boss you don't agree with, right? And do nothing. Or you find ways of twisting the story and coming out. I mean, look at all the 2016 Russiagate stuff, right? That's coming out now. I don't know how much Russia was really interfering with the election as much as the spin was being put on, right? And those are exactly the people who were sitting in DC getting guaranteed salaries, right? So, I see a benefit. I think if the greater good of the shutdown is that we could sort of start rooting out that thing. And again, I get it. The co-equal branches, judiciary has the power, and we've not even talked about Congress's power here, which we should, and executive branch, the power is. But at the end of the day, we do agree that each of those branches has a clear leader, right? The Supreme Court, Chief Justice for the judiciary, the Congress, both houses, either if you want to say the House Speaker and the majority leader, right? And then the executive branch is the president. So their authority, at least within that branch, should be paramount under obviously the guise of the law and the Constitution, right? They should be operating. But I mean, going back to what we were talking about on the federal government, I mean, it's yes, in the areas that the federal government has exclusive power, absolutely they should have the control, like immigration, the ability to wage war, right? You don't want every 50 state to be like, I'm in war with Mexico, and then the government's like, what are you talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the flip
Right.
side is that the powers that are left to the states, let the states have it. And what the federal government has done for the last 60 years has been, well, hey, we control federal taxes, how we give you the spending. So we may not necessarily be able to control your local fuel standards, right? But we're not going to give you, we're going to hold your gasoline tax money hostage, which means your roads will fall apart, right? So I think this could be another. I think we'll see how long the government shutdown stays. Whether it's just Monday, lo and behold, people may come back to their senses. I think in the first Trump administration, the longest one was 35 days, and it was a fight again over the same kind of healthcare thing that's going on, right?
Yeah.
But what do you think? Okay, so let me pivot. Let me ask you
Okay.
this. So what do you think? What do you think about what has been said as the root cause of the shutdown, which is that Congress has been unable to agree on a budget because the Democrats are sort of wanting to have the Obamacare credits extended? What do you think about that? I mean, do you
Yeah, I mean, the Republicans blame the Democrats. The Democrats blame the Republicans. I think the Republicans have majority right now, and they need 7 or 8 Democrats to defect to pretty much do whatever it is they want. And that's where I think there are enough moderate Democrats in the House to give them that 7 or 8. Unfortunately, I don't think the Blue Party always operates in unison with one another behind a core message, even if the message is kind of a stupid one. I've seen that Republicans can sort of coalesce behind a message and get that thing done.
Right.
May not affect anybody besides a small group of people, but they got that thing done onto the next thing, and then you just repeat the process onto the next thing. But I think the root cause of it is because of how the constitutional system, how the constitutional experiment that is America is how we have set up our government. I don't think it's any particular person's fault. In this country, those in the minority have a certain power and have a certain say. And the founding fathers were very sensitive to faction forming. They were sensitive to majorities taking over and then doing whatever the hell they wanted at the expense of the minority. So I feel like this: if the Red Party wants to fund the government and have most of its plan put into action, or most of the the big beautiful bill put into action, that's all fine and good. You just have to negotiate. Everything's a negotiation. That's what law has taught me. Every time you hear the word no, the N in no stands for negotiation. That's it. You negotiate. I was at a mediation with a client very recently, and I represented a tenant. The landlord was the party was the opposing party, and the landlord really, really wanted something. And I had the mediator in it. I won't be too specific, but I literally started negotiating against the mediator's negotiation to get the case done. And the mediator was like blown away. He was like, most of the time you have 2 people who come in. This is my position. This is your position. And the mediator has to do all the work to try to bring everyone to the table. But here, I tried a different deal. I said, at the end of the day, what's best for my client? Probably saving thousands in fees, saving thousands in expenses, and being able to just go on with life. So let's negotiate. And that's what got it done. Like, I became a negotiator, okay? And I had to negotiate with my client, had to negotiate with the opposing party, had to negotiate with the mediator. But I think everybody at the end of the day was quite happy with what, that the thing got done. And that's what I think has to happen more in Congress is negotiate with each other. It used to be that the president would be from elected from one party with the electoral college. The vice president had to come from the opposing party. That's how it used to be. Now that's all changed. And that's what the founding fathers envisioned, to force us to always negotiate with one another and work with one another. If the red party wins the presidency, all fine and good. The runner up gets the vice presidency. Okay? That way, the country has representation from both sides. Right now, it's basically a two-party system. You've got Green Party, Libertarian Party, you've got a bunch of other parties, but the majority of the money and the votes come from the red party or the blue party. And I think it would not be unwise to reconsider going back to a system like that, because it forces you to, and I forget when Congress changed it, but it forces you, you have to negotiate with the other side on everything.
Right.
And it makes one wonder if we are so polarized and the country's politics are either you're all the way left, you're in radical left, or you're in super conservative right. If no one's working with each other, what actually happens? It seems to me very little can actually happen unless you have a supermajority of one party in power over the other party. Very little can happen. If we want things to happen, we have to start negotiating with each other. And my thought is basically that negotiation can save America.
Yeah.
Continued, we see folks from the blue attack folks on the red side. We see now agency heads going after senators at hearings. I mean, we're seeing all sorts of things that are frankly very entertaining to see. But somebody from Russia, somebody from China, somebody from a communist country looks at that and they say, wow, is the democratic experience really working? You know, every governmental system has dysfunction. There's no perfect system. But what I like about the American system is you have representation. Representation matters. And if you want to get something done, you have to negotiate. So a lot of people have said, hey, you go to Congress to change the world, but you just wind up keeping the status quo. Well, we can change that.
Right.
You know, it's not too late to go back and change that. So I think that honestly, rhetoric on both sides, I'd sort of like to see that toned down some, and I'd like to see things get done.
Right. And that is important at the end of the day. Like, scoring points sounds fun. I think in this world of TikTok and all this kind of like social media where everyone wants a small sound, but you're absolutely right. Is it becoming, for us not to work together? I mean, at the end of the day, we're all Americans, right? We're all, at the heart, we should all be, standing for, a better country. I mean, I think, we'll take that oath, at least as lawyers, we absolutely do, right? Stand for the Constitution.
Yeah. And it's beautiful to see a president, like from the top, say, I'm not president of this party, I'm president of everybody.
Right.
The whole country.
Right. No, and absolutely. And I think what's interesting in the shutdown is, I mean, he is saying, I mean, I guess, and we can talk about that, is like, he said that he has this incredible power that he's been granted, right? Which is true, because there is some funds which are left over, which he has authority to spend, deem who's essential versus not essential. And I think, honestly, like this, I think you're right. This is a failure of negotiation at Congress, right? The president put forward, he was willing to have the same budget as a total amount as last year, right? So it's not as if he was saying, okay, cut this out. And obviously there were going to be some changes in line items and priorities, but that happened as normal, right? And I think, part of the problem was who the Democrats, as a party in the minority, you have to realize that you don't have the power, right? I mean, the only power is this weird Senate rule that says a filibuster needs to have 60 votes, which I don't even think is constitutional to begin with, right? Mm-hmm. It's, there's nowhere in the Constitution does it talk about a filibuster and how you need these 7 Democrats or 7 Republicans when they're not in power to make a decision, right? So it's a power to approve. That should be majority rules. I mean, I think one thing, I've always said, get rid of the filibuster rule and you'll have a lot of, change in our modality. But, who does the Democrats have as their leaders in Congress? They have Schumer, who's a lifer establishment. He's cut from the same cloth as Nancy Pelosi was. And then, Hakeem Jeffries, who's also from New York, relatively new in the position as House Minority Leader. I think he's just been doing it now. Maybe this is second Congress, or maybe even first one, right? So he's a little bit new to this. He was obviously in the, you know,
I like him. I like him a lot. He's a negotiator.
yeah, but I think he's also new. I mean, I think there's part of the thing is like Democrats, all of their, sort of their powers now in these New Yorkers, right? So you have like Jeffries, you have Schumer, AOC is trying to make a run for, she's mentioning floating Senate or president. Mamdani, who's in the news, mayor of New York City, right? And I think,
is he socialist? That'll be something.
yeah, exactly. And then like I remember how mad all the Democrats were back a few months ago when they had another, temporary funding kind of thing crisis, and the one lone Democrat who voted with the Republicans to fund it was Schumer, right? And everyone was like, we want Schumer's head, and I remember AOC came out and said, I can't believe Schumer sold out the party. I think there is a streak of like, we just need to do the opposite of whatever Trump says, right? That's coming out, and that's also not helpful, right? Just as much as like do the opposite of Biden, right? You got to look at the policy, and see what's actually good for your country and your constituents. So that's one. Two is, again, I agree with you. Failure to negotiate properly. I mean, I don't understand why, if the Obamacare, subsidies expire, there's going to be a midterm election come 2026. If the country is truly upset about it, vote out these people, right? I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, we have elections. I mean, right, and none of them have ended. We did have the 2020 election, right? As much as people said we're never going to have elections again after Trump got elected. So, I think
he's also said if you vote for him, you won't have to vote again.
I mean, I think the 2028 Trump, I mean, that's trolling. He's a master troller, and I do chuckle when he does it. But I mean, he's not. I don't think he's planning on rerunning for the third term. It's not possible.
Well, it'll probably require a constitutional amendment,
right,
of course.
Exactly. Right. And I think he may be joking and saying that his son may run, Donald Trump Jr. or something, right?
Oh.
Who could be eligible to run, or maybe at some point his daughter had been floated, right? But anyway, besides that, to predict who's going to run, I think the shutdown, it'll be interesting to see. Now, one thing I will say, the implications of the shutdown in the past, there has been zero implications in the past, right? Okay, government employees who are non-essential sit at home, and government employees who are essential do have to come into work. It's a little bit unfair that they're doing it while unpaid, right? I acknowledge that. But at the same time, they've always been granted their salary back, whether they're working or not. That's unfair. I mean, how do you feel about that? If we don't work, what happens, George?
Right. I mean, if we don't work, chaos ensues. Lawyers prevent chaos. We are the last line of defense between order and chaos.
But do you eat? I mean, what do you do? I mean, what do you do when you don't have? If you choose not to work, or your client has not come in, what do you do? Right? What does the average human being do?
Probably quit.
Right. Well, quit. Right. Yeah. Exactly. If you want certainty, I mean, my dad was in oil and gas. Your dad was in oil and gas. Oil and gas goes through layoffs every few years. Whenever the price dips. I mean, the number of times we didn't come and complain and say, "Oh, when we get our job back," which would always happen. "Oh, you need to pay us back for that." Yeah. I mean, there's unemployment. That's why everyone, government employees included, pay into the unemployment system, right? So I think it's a bit unfair. If you're going to do the shutdown, have it as a true consequence where you don't get paid when you get back, right? Yeah. I think it's you should get paid. I don't know. To me, I think that's a bribe, and I think that's that's exactly everything the government's supposed to not allow. It's like, you're a government employee. You're the only industry that if you get laid off and you get sent home or furloughed, you still get all the money back. Why? Quit. If you can't afford it, you can't afford to be a government employee. I'm for it. Go get another job. Be a productive member of society in a for-profit venture, and not just because you're sucking at the government's teeth and our tax dollars, right? And I think what's happened is that this game of like chicken, it's not even really chicken, because when you're calling a bluff, the story, right? The two cars are coming at each other, and whoever turns first is chicken, right? It's not even that, because even if everyone knows the drama, the theater, this is all theater, right? If you pay them back and bring everyone back. So I think this is going to be a good test to see, like, are we going to continue the same old with a little bit more rhetoric? It's a little bit more extreme on both sides. Oh, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to bring you back. Grim Reaper ads. But if you pay everyone who comes back, what exactly have you done during the shutdown? Right? It's
I agree.
Vacation.
I agree. On that note, we're going to close this episode out. We're still judging you, America. Join us next time. Give us a like and a follow.